Okay, welcome back from lunch, everyone. If everyone can please have their seats, we're going to go ahead. I'd like to, as chair, kick off and call to order the meeting of the Tautog Management Board. My name is Mike Luisi. I am an administrative proxy with the state of Maryland and will be chairing this meeting today. Up here at the table with me, I have James Boyle, our FMP coordinator, Jason Snellbaker, representing the Law Enforcement Committee, and Dr. Katie Drew with ASMFC's science group, I guess we can call it, in case there are questions related to that. Okay, jumping right into the first item on today's agenda. The first item is to approve the agenda. Are there any modifications for the agenda as it stands? Seeing none, I'll assume that's a consent to approve the agenda, so consider the agenda approved. The next item on the agenda is approval of the proceedings from the August 2nd, 2023 meeting. Are there any modifications to the proceedings to suggest? Seeing none, consider the proceedings approved by consent. And that gets us to public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to provide public comment on something that is not on the agenda? If it's related to agenda items, there'll be an opportunity to provide your comment during that time if the board is considering taking action. Okay, seeing none, I can't see online. Is there anyone online? Okay. Okay, so seeing no hands from the public on items that are not on the agenda, let's go ahead and move into item 4 on the agenda. I'm sorry. There was a hand. I'm being told. Nicholas Marchetti.
Yes.
Are you there? Did you want to make public comment on something that's not on the agenda today?
I didn't see what was on the agenda to begin with.
Okay. Well, the agenda is posted online.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You can't hear us?
Yes. Yes, I hear you. Yes.
Okay. So the main item on today's agenda, which you can find if you go to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission's website at asmfc.org and go to the annual meeting. There's a posted version of the agenda with all of the necessary information for you to follow along. The main item for consideration, we're going to receive a technical committee report on the tagging program. And so there's likely going to be discussion around that program. So if you have any comments that aren't related to the commercial tagging program, now's the time. But if not, if you want to hold your comment to the tagging program, I can call on you then. It's up to you.
I do have comment on the tagging program, so would you like me to wait?
Okay. So I'll put you down. I'll make note here and give you an opportunity, Nicholas, when we have that discussion about the tagging program.
Thanks.
All right. So moving on to our really only action item here today, or possible action, is just that. It's consider the technical committee report on the commercial tagging program. We're going to get a presentation from James. And so James, whenever you're ready, we can go ahead and kick that off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, we can just jump right into it. Thank you. I'm going to be presenting a pretty quick update on the progress that TC has made since the last meeting in August. So the TC met shortly after the August board meeting to respond to the board motion taken in that meeting, which tasked them with evaluating the smaller version of the current tag, or NBT tag, as I'll refer to it later, and determine any other tags that may be feasible for the commercial tagging program. At the meeting, the TC identified the T-bar and Peterson disc tags as potential alternatives to be tested, and the DART tag was added later from discussions after the meeting. New York is planning to conduct the study by issuing 50 tags each to a number of dealers and harvesters that have volunteered to do live market testing. Therefore, the fish will be held in actual market conditions. The participants will have a daily survey and send photos twice per week to monitor the health of the fish over time. However, in the discussion, it was noted that given the short turnaround to the annual meeting from the August meeting, the only feasible study could only include the smaller NBT tag and be conducted over just 2 weeks. So in order to make the study more robust, it was decided to expand it to 30 days to evaluate all potential tag types, but consequently, there are no results available as of yet. Thank you. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, James. That's how quick reports can be when it wasn't actually carried out the way that it was expected to. So any questions for James on the tagging report? John Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, James. My memory was refreshed that the reason like T-bar tags weren't considered for initially was because it was thought they could be reusable. Is the committee thinking of any ways that if a tag like that probably is superior in terms of not damaging the fish is chosen, that they could be accounted for so that the tags couldn't be reused, or just looking right now at retention, tag retention, and whether it damages the fish?
James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so the committee right now is just looking at whether the tag is feasible to work in terms of the health of the fish. But the plan is to have law enforcement involvement during that study, especially in New York, to evaluate the feasibility of the tag from that other perspective as well.
Yeah, so John, just to get to your point, there have been issues that have been raised over the past few years regarding the tag, where the tag's placed on the fish, and some of the consequences, I guess, to the fish that are ultimately going to be part of the commercial sale. We're not protecting them, but I guess the consequences would be to the health of the fish as it's held with a tag prior to sale. John.
If I could just follow up, Mike. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know that was the concern, and that's why we went with that tag that really could not be reused, but obviously it's causing damage to the fish. So I'm just thinking, if we were to use something like a T-bar tag, it would seem like we'd need a way to account for the tags at both ends, both at the fisherman end and at the dealer end, to make sure they're not reused.
Yeah, and I know that, and others may have a different opinion on this, but I know that the tag we currently use is designed not to be reused. But in discussions I've had with my staff, and I've seen some examples of those tags being able to bend a number of times prior to having them snap or break. So, maybe that's something down the road that we could also work on as well. Are there any other questions for James? Yes, Roy Miller.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, wouldn't a T-bar tag be subject to the fish, other fish in the tank, removing them? Considering Tautog is a wrasse and their feeding strategy, wouldn't they be inclined to pluck off a T-bar tag?
My aquarium at home doesn't have a tag Tautog in it, so Roy, I don't know what to tell you on that one. Yeah, others may have an observation. I don't know. It could be. I'm not aware of the containers for which these fish are being kept either, whether it's all one species or a number of different species, or how they would interact. It's beyond my knowledge of the issue. Sorry. James, did you have anything? Okay. Are there any other questions? Yeah, John, I'll come to you in just a second. I'm going to go to Dan McKiernan, and then John Maniscalco will come back to you. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was the TC going to endeavor to shed light on holding conditions, like density of the fish and length of fish, and trying to understand the real need for this? I do recall that when the first tag was tested, even though it was small, it was same design and principle, it probably wasn't held for very long or in high density and maybe degraded water quality. And so everything looked fine. And so I'm wondering if, as part of this this investigation, that the TC could look into the actual holding conditions that the dealers are subjecting the fish to.
James?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we can, so the point of having the study designed the way it is through New York is to, so that it will be in actual market conditions, but it's definitely something we can make note of in this survey to have a note of it, what each individual dealer and harvester is doing, and that might shed some light on that.
I would request it not just be a written survey, but maybe folks go into those facilities and take a firsthand look at it. I think that would be really valuable.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I'm going to go online. I have John Maniscalco. John?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to touch on a couple of points. So the tamperability of that current tag that we are using was demonstrated to me. They can be repeatedly used, and I understand that there's a small market in those tags alone. So it is not a perfect solution. And then just regarding, holding conditions. So fishermen and dealers have held tautog for many years prior to the tagging program, and it didn't result in the infection and the mortality that we're seeing. So I think it's more upon the program has to adapt to their practices, not their practices have to, completely change in order to accommodate our tag. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. All right, any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Anything else online? Yeah, Nicholas, if you just, I'll come back to you. I have you marked down as a note to provide public comment. We don't have there's nothing to discuss at this point. If there are no questions, I will turn to the board, seeing that there are no questions, and ask if anyone has any possible action or potential action they would like to take in the case of the tagging report and the questions and answers that were given. What are the next steps? Where do we go from here? Okay, we're anxiously awaiting for a hand to raise. John Maniscalco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a short presentation prepared. If you'll give me a few minutes of the board's time.
Yes, we can do that. He needs, oh, hold on one second. We're going to get it teed up for you. Hold on one second. John, can you see the presentation from where you are?
I can, thanks.
Okay, it's all you.
All right, so thank you all today for allowing me some time to discuss tagging program issues, and since time is short, I'm just going to get right to it. Next slide, please. So the commercial tautog tagging program was established by Amendment 1 back in 2017 to address poor coastwide stock status and the black market for live fish. After delays, the program was implemented by many states in 2020, although some, New York included, implemented in 2021 due to COVID. Next slide, please. Section 4.4.1 of Amendment 1 includes 4 tagging program objectives. That included as an aid to enforcement through easy identification of illegal fish in markets. That tags must be consistent across states. That tags should be single-use, difficult to fake, and fully accounted for at season's end. And finally, that tags must be compatible with the live market. More on that later. Next slide, please. A quick review of the 2022 commercial fishery and tag use. There are just over 1,000 participants coast-wide, most of which are in the northern part of the fishery, and almost half of which operate in New York State. Over 250,000 tags were issued in 2022, and 160,000 were reported used, over 3/4 of them by New York State fishermen. Next slide, please. So 2023 marks the third and fourth year of program implementation by participating states. The Law Enforcement Committee feels that the tagging program has successfully reduced illegal harvest and sale, pushing it further underground. This change cannot be quantified as most states lack the capacity to track citations and violations issued by species over time. Regardless, tagged fish are easy to see and can be traced to the original harvester in some cases. There is also support for the program, if not the current tag, by participating fishermen, as the tagged fish inhibit markets from being flooded by illegal fish, maintaining demand and price. Next slide, please. While many states did hear complaints about the tagging program upon implementation, New York heard many regarding mortality, damage, and infections at the site of tagging and impacts to fish value. New York initiated a survey of its industry in 2022, which confirmed that these issues were widespread throughout New York. ASMSC followed suit, and the technical committee developed and distributed a survey early in the spring of 2023. The survey was summarized in a TC memo late May and provided to the board during the summer meeting. In brief, live market participants from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia all reported excessive mortality, damage, and lesions. 10 to 25% of their product was the most common stated portion of their harvest affected, but some responses went as high as 75 to 100%. And since the live market wants pristine fish, these fish fetch a much reduced price or are rejected outright. Next slide, please. In summary, there is support for tagging by both law enforcement and some fishermen. However, the current tag results in additional mortality and damage to live market fish. This represents a serious negative economic impact to participating fishermen, many of which are from New York State. Tagging impacts are contrary to Objective 4, which specifically states that the program must have minimal to no impact on the appearance or condition of live fish for the amount of time that live tagged fish are maintained until consumption. I'll remind the board again that this market and the practice of holding fish existed prior to the tagging program. We are beyond growing pains as the program has been implemented for 3 to 4 years now in participating jurisdictions. Next slide, please. Regional stocks have improved since Amendment 1 was passed. As of the last assessment, overfishing was not occurring, and the New York-New Jersey Bight regional spawning stock biomass was just under the threshold. What is currently being done? New York has been cooperating with the technical committee and ASMSC leadership to continue to test alternative tags and tagging locations. Last tests run late spring, early summer did not have positive results. Tags among fin rays did not last and fell out. Tags in the caudal peduncle caused moderate damage even after a short holding time, and the cinch or zip tie style tag resulted in significant abrasion after a short holding period. After technical committee feedback in mid-August, New York State hopes to continue with looking at Floyd T-bar style tags and the original small strap tag New York initially tested in 2016. An alphanumeric solution has been found for the numbering issue that originally caused ASMSC to switch to the current larger untested tag. No tagging alternatives will be ready to implement for the 2024 fishing year. Next slide, please. New York feels that the impacts to live market participants are not acceptable and contrary to the tagging program objectives stated in Amendment 1. And due to the lack of an identified suitable alternative, New York proposes that the tagging program be suspended for 2024 while viable tag alternatives are identified and tested with industry cooperators. The ASMSC would have to revisit the tagging program and the suspension once an alternative has been chosen or if no tag proves suitable. There is no question that this will be disruptive. New York State administered over 180,000 tags to over 450 fishermen in 2022, and this effort dwarfs the rest of the coast. My hat is off to all the staff here that made this program happen in New York and elsewhere. Resuming the program will be a bumpy process, but it is New York State's intention to find an alternative and to resume the tagging program. The current tag and its impact on the live market fishery is not acceptable. It is contrary to the program objectives and has economic consequences for fishermen that participate in the live market. And that includes fishermen, as shown by the 2023 TC survey from nearly every state in the fishery, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. Thank you for the time today. I expect there will be some discussion, but I am prepared to make a motion whenever it pleases the board.
Okay, thanks, John. I think in order to keep things on track, and there'll be an opportunity for discussion and perhaps questions regarding what you propose or what you're proposing and any other parts of the presentation that you gave. Let's go ahead and see if we can get your motion up on the board, and I'll look to have you read that into the record, and I'll look for a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the Tautog Management Board, by emergency action as defined in the ISFMP Charter, suspend the coastwide commercial Tautog tagging program for 180 days to prevent additional negative impacts to the live market fishery, and initiate an addendum that will implement the suspension for the remainder of the 2024 fishing year, and consider a longer-term suspension if a suitable tag satisfying Objective 4 in Section 4.4.1 of Amendment 1 cannot be identified in time for implementation for 2025. If I have a second, I can speak to the motion. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, John. Hang tight for a second. Okay, so we have a motion made by John Maniscalco. I'll look to the board to see if there's anyone that will second that motion. Justin Davis is seconding the motion. John, do you want to speak to your motion?
Sure, thank you. So I hope that my presentation provided the board with the information they need to see a tagging program suspension for 2024 as necessary. Widespread issues with tags damaging live market fishery wherever it occurs, not just in New York, which is contrary to the program objectives stated in Amendment 1, and the need to stop hurting law-abiding fishermen while a suitable alternative is found. I know that use of another emergency action is not popular at the moment. The definition of emergencies shall apply, and I'm going to paraphrase, when the attainment of fishery management objectives have been placed substantially at risk by unanticipated changes in the fishery. Now, New York raised the issue of industry difficulties with the current tag a number of times since statewide implementation in 2021. I have heard a number of times that we aren't seeing this in my state, that this is growing pains, or that it's a New York problem. The 2023 survey summary from the TC shared with the board during the summer meeting shows that the live market fishery participants in almost every state in the fishery are seeing difficulties with this tag. It damages their product, and as you can read in supplementary materials or hear from public participants today, hurts their market. That revelation of coastwide live market impacts was quickly followed by a mid-August technical committee memo that notes that no tagging trials of sufficient duration can be conducted in time for the annual meeting. This is the first time that the board can react to the news that the tag is a problem, counter to program objectives, and that no solution is available. Our choice is to subject fishermen to a tag we know now is not suitable, or suspend the program today while work continues to identify something better. Alternative processes like a fast-track addendum will not provide fishermen or states the certainty they need to prepare for 2024, as no decision will be made until much later in the year, if not January. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, John. I'll next go to our seconder. Dr. Davis, do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think John did a great job of laying out the rationale for this motion, so I won't belabor it. Just from my standpoint, I think this is a reasonable ask. It's a valuable program. It's clear that it is having an impact on illegal live trade. I think it's also clear that it's having a negative economic impact on fishermen who are participating in the fishery. And I sort of feel like the long-term success of this program is going to be most assured if we're doing it in a collaborative, cooperative manner with the commercial fishermen. So I think this is just a reasonable step back to say we know that these tags are having a negative economic impact. We're going to go back and reassess how to avoid that in collaboration with the commercial industry. Could this lead to an uptick in illegal live trade during the year that the program is suspended? It could. I think ultimately that's a worthwhile trade-off if this ensures the long-term success of the program and they can operate in a way and not have a negative impact on the fishery. So I think this is a reasonable ask. I will admit I have some qualms about using emergency action to implement this. And, you know, I'm not going to at this time, you know, sort of contemplate an amendment or a change to this motion to do it a different way, because I'm interested to hear the conversation around the table and whether there's support. But I will note for the record that I'm not sure this is appropriate for emergency action. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. And I think before we take the vote, I want to make sure that all the board members are clear as to process, because the 180 days that's part of the emergency process doesn't get us through the entire year, which means another document, an amendment to the document or an addendum. I guess an addendum would need to be be started. And I think we can have that discussion if there's any disconnect between this motion and kind of what the foreseeable future looks like as far as board actions. Shannon, I'm going to come back to you. I had Bill Hyatt, and then I thought I saw another hand, Jason, and then Shannon, and then we'll just bounce back and forth. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support continuing to look at alternatives within the tagging program, but I'm against taking a pause in the program. Outline a little bit my thoughts. The 2021 stock assessment update showed improvement across all regions with regard to TOG, but the success wasn't universal. I think, as you saw from John's presentation, that the population in the New York Bight remained to be overfished. Plus, the recovery in the two northern regions, Long Island Sound and Mass and Rhode Island, was not something I would say is a dramatic recovery. The biomass levels that resulted were nowhere near historic levels for TOG. In fact, I'd say that the recovery in those regions, both Long Island Sound and Mass, Rhode Island, was wafer thin. And I wish at some point if somebody was able to pull up some of those graphs on the biomass and from the 2021 stock assessment update, I think it would be useful for folks to look at. The tagging program was implemented to address a well-documented problem of illegal harvest, and our best information is that it's been successful at addressing that problem. And I think that was reflected not only in the presentation we just saw, but also very clearly in Kurt Blanchard's comments in the proceedings from our last meeting. And lastly, I'll point out that this fishery it's worthwhile to protect the interests of the commercial fishery, but this fishery is over 90% recreational, and that's where the vast majority of the benefit lies. And that benefit depends upon having robust and recovered TOG stocks. This is a long-lived species, a species that I think it's very reasonable to say is vulnerable to local overexploitation problems. So for all of those reasons, the fact that there's been a wafer-thin recovery in this stock as reflected in the 2021 update, the fact that the tagging program has been successful, and the very high value of this fishery to the recreational sector, I would argue that while it absolutely makes sense to continue looking at alternatives, it absolutely doesn't make sense to pause the program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Jason, I'm going to go to you, and then Shannon, you'll be next. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just note before, when you were talking about the emergency rule, I saw Bob Beal raise his hand, so I don't know if you want to go to him and come back to me. Sticking with me? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not going to restate everything that Bill Hyatt just said. I agree with everything he said. I'm just like Bill said, fine with new alternatives being tested, but I think pausing the program for any amount of time is extremely problematic for the states that have successfully implemented the program. To stop it and restart it again is not something I think would work really well in Rhode Island. And just another couple of notes to show that I think the program is working well. I mean, we've seen landings increase, I think, across the board, which means people are doing a better job reporting their catch. And the data in Rhode Island, I kind of wondered about the comments about the economic impact. And so we took a look at the average price per pound in Rhode Island, and it's gone up during the time period. So we're not seeing the economic issue, at least it's not making it into the data. I can think of a couple of ways, that might be occurring, but looking at the numbers, the price per pound in a couple of different versions has gone up in Rhode Island. So, again, I'm opposed to pausing the program. Totally fine with even, I don't dispute any of those pictures were ghastly, and I'm glad I ate lunch before I saw them. I don't want to see something like that happen to any fish, in particular to Tautog. So, I would even be fine with allowing New York to kind of test some other tag if they've, found something that they think is going to be successful. But that's the other problem here is there's no alternative. I think John was very clear in his presentation that the way that I interpreted his presentations, we're not sure if we're going to be able to find a tag that can sort of meet all of those parameters. So again, opposed to the pause, not opposed to looking for a better, there's got to be a solution out there. So I'm fine to continue to pursue that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Jason. Shannon Madsen.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I actually have two questions before I get to my comment. It was in regards to, first question is in regards to your discussion of the emergency action being 180 days, and then after that point, we would have to implement an addendum. Does the board not have discretion to extend the emergency action like we did for striped bass?
So the board can extend the emergency action only if a addendum has been initiated and there's work being done on an addendum, is my understanding. You can't go another year from the 180 days without having started something new that's going to essentially take the place of the emergency, or in some way either let the emergency expire or have an addendum in place to set the direction for management moving forward. Hope that's clear.
Yeah, that actually helps a lot, Mike. I appreciate that, because that kind of, it gives me a lot of pause then to also have to think about bringing in an addendum to the table. My other question is actually for the Law Enforcement Committee. Has the committee, I know the committee meets, I think, tomorrow. Has the committee been given a chance to discuss the implications of pausing a program and then having to bring it back and re-implement it coastwide?
Okay, I don't know the answer to that one, so I'm going to turn to Jason.
We have not had the opportunity to discuss that.
Okay, so I guess that kind of leads into my comment. I won't repeat what Bill Hyatt and Jason McNamee said. I am in complete agreement with what those two gentlemen brought up. I also agree with the end of Justin's statement and the sentiment that I don't feel comfortable moving this forward as an emergency action. I also don't feel comfortable with pausing this program in order to essentially go in and put an addendum in place. So it looks like we would have to pause the program for 180 days, start working on an addendum, and then potentially continue with the emergency action through 2024. I think that's a lot of, it's a lot of lift for staff. And I think it would be incredibly problematic for the whole coast to have to pull that section out of regulation, put it back in, and then try to make sure that that's re-implemented. I don't think that that's really appropriate or helpful to our law enforcement. And frankly, again, I agree with Jason and Bill. I can't see putting this pause in at this time, but I am in full support, again, of trying to determine another way forward. There's got to be something else out there that is going to work for this live market. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Shanna. I have a couple more hands. Let me come, Jason, was that you raising? Okay, moving the mic. Okay, so what I've heard so far is that the board members who have spoken, other than the maker and the seconder of the motion, have been supportive of the concept of finding a replacement tag, but not so much in favor of either the emergency style for which this action would need to happen, or suspending the tagging program with a follow-up addendum that would have to be initiated probably sometime between now and next summer. So that's kind of the summary of what I've heard. Is there any other new information? Okay, I'm going to stay here just for a second, John, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, Emerson Hasbrook.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I fully support this motion. We know the tags are having a negative impact on the fish and on the fishing industry. And we're not meeting the objectives of the tagging program. You know, as John mentioned, one of the objectives was to implement a tagging program to accommodate the commercial fishing industry. We're not accommodating them. We're having a negative impact on the industry. Another objective was to have minimal to no impact on the appearance or condition of live fish. Well, we're certainly having a significant impact on the appearance and condition of live fish. So we're violating both of those objectives. And you know, this is not just a New York problem. As John outlined, the survey respondents from all states report serious problems with fish condition from these tags. And also, I've heard around the table here this afternoon that this tagging program has been successful for enforcement. And I'm wondering how that is defined. You know, what are the parameters here that are defining success for enforcement? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Emerson. I don't know I don't want to put you on the spot, Jason, but I might, regarding what are the parameters for success in the enforcement of the tagging program?
So that's one of the things that we've discussed at the Law Enforcement Committee in great length. And, you know, we're seeing success in the program, you know, based on the lack of enforcement issues that have occurred. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to qualify because the illegal sale and take of these fish, is it more underground? Did we push it underground, or is the tag having a direct impact? It's hard to quantify that. And we've had those discussions, but we feel that the program is effective. It is working. But again, is it working because is it going underground and we're not seeing it, or is it legitimately 100% keeping black market fish from getting into the market and being sold? We've also had instances where, like, you know, I'll speak on New Jersey since that's where I'm from. We've increased the penalty to $100 a fish versus $30 a fish, and you know that could be an indirect result as well. So that could kind of convolute what we're actually seeing and why we're seeing it. Is it the penalty, or is it the tagging program? You know, the Law Enforcement Committee is aware of some ongoing poaching issues that the tagging program will be assisting us in prosecution down the road. It's not available for discussion at this time, but there is a few pending cases that are out there that the tagging program is going to help us with prosecution matters. That's all I have at this time.
All right, thanks, Jason. Was there anyone else that wanted to speak? I saw Dan's hand, so let's do this. I'm going to go to Dan, then we're going to take some public comment on the motion, and then we'll take a break for a quick caucus, and we'll call the question and see where we end up. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I have 3 points to make. First, over the lifetime of the program in Massachusetts, the ex-vessel price of Tautog prices paid to fishermen by dealers has gone up 11%. So we don't see the negative trends in the value of the fish. I'm not minimizing that some dealers might be caught holding fish they can't sell. But to my earlier point, I think that it would be really useful to get a more complete description of the holding conditions and what the expectations of dealers are. And, that's the first thing I want to say. The question about how can you measure the effectiveness of the enforcement? There was an individual in Massachusetts who was not only a fisherman, but he was a dealer himself. And he had a fish returned to him because the New York environmental police went into the market, saw the fish, pointed it out to the New York dealer. The New York dealer shipped it back to him. This fish was caught by that dealer because he also had a rod and reel permit, so he was out of his mind. But sure enough, it was a 15-inch fish. It was an inch too short. So that's the kind of enforcement accountability that we got with this tagging program. Then the last thing I'll say is, while it's not measurable, I did speak to a prominent New York dealer a year after Massachusetts enacted the tagging program, who said that when Massachusetts enacted the program, his fish were worth more because the illegal fish from New Bedford were no longer on the New York market. And that's a real win for us because, as Bill Hyatt said, it's predominantly a recreational fishery. And to us, the poaching that was occurring was not only rampant, but spectacular. I mean, we had busts of like thousands of pounds of fish completely off of the reporting system in the past. So I'm in favor of I'm opposed to the motion, but I am in favor of maybe a white paper of some kind that better describes the challenges that the dealers have, and also looking at the overall economic considerations, because we don't see the negative economic consequences in Massachusetts.
Okay, thanks, Dan. John, staff told me your hand was up. I'll give you the last word, and then I'm going to go to the public. Go ahead, John.
Hey, Mike, I just want to let you know, Chris Wright has had his hand up. He's your NOAA rep for a little bit online, just as a heads up.
Okay, thank you. Chris, why don't we go to you since you've had your hand up for a while? John, hold off for a second and we'll come back and you can have the last word before we go to the public. Chris?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not there in person and I got stuck online. But I'm a little bit leery about suspending the program. My original question was, I believe, for Dan in regards to the study. And are they going to have a control where they're going to have untagged fish in this study, in the same tanks, so that you can get a comparison? And just a follow up to that is that before we had the tagging program, did we have condition issues with those live fish market type fish of sores and stuff? Just from folks' memory, because I wasn't on the board for Tautog before that, and I'm just trying to get a gauge of what the past conditions were.
I'm sorry, Chris, I was talking at a sidebar. Did you have was there a question that needed an answer? I'm sorry, I missed the last about 30 seconds of what you said.
Yes, I wanted to see if there was a control with the study that Dan was proposing, and then a follow-up question in regards to the condition of the fish prior to the tagging program. If folks have a recollection, was there, I guess, fish type issues in regards to their condition, being held in those live tanks? I'm not sure if you heard my original thing. I thought I was getting through. I'm not sure. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, we can hear you. We heard everything you said. I just leaned over to talk to James quickly, and then you stopped talking, and I didn't know how you ended your statement. So let's go to James to see if he has any thoughts on the study design, and then we can take your next question or your follow-up from that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll defer to New York if there's a correction here, but to my knowledge, there was not a discussion of having an untagged control group, but it is something that can be considered. There was some discussion about whether the fish can be purchased to better control the length of time that each individual fish remains in the tank. So if that were the case, then it can be something that can be considered. but it has not been implemented in the study as of yet.
Okay, I would think that control would bolster the results in regards to if there's a holding tank and it's just, putrid. I've done fish work and tagged fish and did controls of, or did these kind of studies before in my past, and we always had a control. And so I would suggest that we would do a control for this too. It wouldn't be that hard to do, especially if it's a small amount of fish. And
Okay.
then my follow-up question prior to that was that prior to this, tagging program, did we have fish condition issues?
Can you say that again? You cut off there short for just a sec.
I said prior to the tagging program, did we have fish condition issues in the live market? Did that come through?
The conditions are not.
Yeah, thanks. We're just trying to figure out who the best person to answer that. James and I, neither of us have experience or seen any of the tags of the fish prior to the tagging program, but Jason Snellbaker has something he wants to offer.
It's been my experience, it runs the gamut. You have some dealers that keep their tanks really clean, and you have some dealers that there's, green algae growing in the tanks and who knows what else. I'm not an expert, but personally, I've been in some of these markets and I would not want to consume some of those fish. Other markets are definitely taking more time and keep their tanks cleaner and par for human consumption.
Okay, thanks. John, did you want to take a moment for last words, and then I'm going to go to the public?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I definitely encourage you and everyone to listen to what members of the public have to say about this. But I did want to cover a couple of issues. Anytime you're holding fish, some proportion of those fish do die. But tagging and live market and fish holding has been happening for a long time prior to the tag, and we never had reports about these large unsightly lesions. Certainly my email box was never filled with pictures with, ghastly lesions on their cheeks, but it is now. So in terms of, impacts of this program on stock condition, I just want to remind everyone, it was already covered, but if 80 to 90% of the fishery is recreational, you can't expect that the tagging program alone is going to be responsible for any kind of downturn or the upturn of the population. I'll just go back to the fact that the New York, New Jersey bite stock status is an improvement. It's been steadily recovering from being overfished, and like I said, it's just below the threshold now. I find it interesting that people claim this program is successful. It's successful in meeting some of its objectives, and many of those have been covered well by others. It's not successful in meeting objectives 3 and 4. It is a tamperable tag. It can be and is being reused. And this tag is certainly not suitable for live market fish. We're seeing lesions, we're seeing damage, we're seeing mortality. That is all contrary to objective number 4 of the tagging program. So to leave it in place when we know it's not doing what it was intended to do is wrong. I am completely behind the program resuming once we have a tag that doesn't result in this kind of impact to live market fish and the fishermen who take them. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Okay, next I'm going to go to the public. I apologize, I can only see kind of silhouettes because of the sun behind you. Can I just see a show of hands? Mr. Vincent, I see you. Is anyone else from the public that's here want to provide comment? All right, so we just have the one here, and then I assume Nicholas will want to, if anyone online can also raise their hand if they want to provide comment. I just want to get a sense as to how many people we're talking about. So it looks like we just have the 2 public comments. So we're going to go ahead and give you guys 3 minutes to provide that comment. If you can get the stopwatch out. Mr. Vincent, if you could take a seat, there's a public microphone. If you would also please just recognize yourself, maybe if you're speaking for a group, and if you could direct your comments to me, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Tor Vincent, New York commercial fisherman. I'd like to address the price stuff first. Rhode Island and Massachusetts implemented their tags during the COVID restaurant collapse. The market was collapsed. We couldn't sell our fish. The price was depressed completely. And that was an extended duration till those restaurants got up to selling the product again like they used to. So the market rebound of price they're describing was from a collapse during COVID, normalizing. We still have a price below what we should have had, even considering inflation and everything, we should be way higher because of the damage to the fish. Okay, I used to be as much as 5% of the New York harvest in some of the old records. Okay, I sell all my fish myself into the city markets. I have extensive knowledge of this. I've been around holding systems for 40 years. I understand what happened. When you guys talk about control, flip the fish over to the side that doesn't have the tag. The fish is perfect. Okay, when I deliver any fish that has a scar on it, it is handed back to me. It is worthless. The same as a dead fish. When I deliver, I'm also given pictures of the fish they had to remove from the tanks because they were scarred and unsaleable, and I have to put credit for those. I have to give them replacement fish. That all is adding up, and anything I store in my tanks and lose track of and come back to has a massive scar, and I can't sell it. When you did your tank testing, you ignored the known science of closed system facilities. The flora of the fish that are in there give off all sorts of bacteria, among them the gram-negative facultative anaerobe bacteria, which are known to cause these infections. We learned all this through the lobster pegs, through the lobster shell disease problems. This is all known science. That was ignored in your testing. That is your responsibility to have used the known science in the testing, and you ignored it. So we're here because no proper testing was done. This would have been avoided had a proper test done. So now you're playing this game where we made a mess. We're going to try to push it down the road. You never tested properly. If you had, you never would have approved those tags, period. No way. The damage is extensive all the time, and you can see it happening. We've shown you pictures in your records. I showed you a picture, one side infected and the other side perfect. You have that in your own documents. We can see that anytime. What happened here is a complete collapse of the decency of you to do proper science. You failed at that. And now you're trying to cover this up with all these sidebars. Do the proper science. Accept the fact that you did extensive harm and find a way to begin apologizing and find a way to figure out what you're going to do about that. We have all sorts of market analysis from the lobster shell disease value difference. These are not marketable. These had to be discarded. These had to be sold dead. And it is an exclusive, perfect fish market where I sell. So what you've done is extreme damage. And I'd like to see you in your tank testing, test the damage from the original tags, so you can qualify the harm that's been done and do it in a closed system facility. Do pathogen testing. Do all of that in the systems you're working on. That's all a $100 test. It's easy to do. That gives you a comparison to a normal fish tank. All that's available. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for not only being here, but providing your thoughts and for that testimony. We have one last person who would like to speak that's online. Nicholas Marchetti. I'm sorry.
Okay, how you doing? My name's Nick Marchetti. I'm a commercial fisherman in New York. I've been fishing this fishery since 2010, from when it opens to when it closes, trap and rod and reel. This tag in the last 2 years has killed so many of my fish because we have to handle these fish in 100-degree weather days. It takes time to put this tag in. And as soon as the fish jumps, it hits the gills and the fish dies by the time you get back to the dock. It's not working at all. Not only does New York have to pay, we have to pay out of our pockets for these tags. Now we're losing fish on top of that. So now we're double dipping into our pockets. I said this a long time ago at this meeting. If you do not hold a commercial fishing license for blackfish, you should not be in possession of live fish. There's no reason why the states can't implement this. You implemented a circle hook for striped bass fishing. There's no reason why we can't implement this. This would drop this off and make the fine so steep that people are not going to want to keep them alive. There's no reason for a recreational fisherman to hold a live fish back to the dock. There's just none. There's absolutely no reason. This would stop the black market. It would fix the fishermen that are doing this for a living. It would help them. We would stop buying this tag and killing our fish. These are not lesions. These are not sores on the fish. This is a disease, a flesh-eating disease. The fish's face is melting off of it. And you want us, and then feeding this to a human. Eventually, somebody's going to get sick and possibly die from this, because this is a disease inside the fish. The guys that are buying the fish from us don't want to lose money, and they're selling the fish. Now, the restaurant is taking this fish. They do not want to lose money. They're going to sell this fish to a paying customer, and they're going to eat it, and the person's going to get sick. This tag is not working. It hasn't worked from the beginning. Yes, it's helping stop the black market, but it is coming out of our pockets in the end. We're losing a lot of money here. We're not saving anything. And you guys are going off our trip reports saying, oh, these guys are catching a lot more fish. The stock is up. It's not, because you want to know why? Because now you have people that just hold a food fish license, and they're scared that they're not going to get tags. So now they're filling out trip reports. They're not even fishing. They're filling out trip reports and just putting this in so they get their tags. They're scared that it's going to turn into the bass tag situation where the last person standing with all the tags wins. That's the problem. That's all I have to say, but I've been doing this for a very long time. I've never seen so much death in the last 2 years of this tagging program. I've never had a problem selling live fish. I've never had a problem keeping live fish. There's not enough science here. It should be taken away until we can figure out a better solution for this. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your public comment. Okay, I assume there's going to be a need for a caucus. Before we take a caucus, Emerson, do you have something new to provide to the discussion? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have something new. I'd like to offer a motion to amend. And I'm going to do this kind of on the fly here. So if we could, on the existing motion, eliminate, starting with by emergency action, eliminate by emergency action as defined in the ISFMP charter, suspend the coastwide commercial Tautog tagging program for 180 days, strike that, and then continue to prevent additional negative impacts on the live market fishery, delete and, live market fishery, initiate, I'm going to say, a fast track addendum, and I'm not even sure what that means. I guess as fast as we can make it happen. And fast track addendum that will implement the suspension, a fast track addendum, and take out that will implement the suspension for the remainder of the 24 fishing year. The addendum will satisfy objective 4 in section 4.4.1. And you can take out cannot be identified in time for implementation for 2025. I hope that makes sense. And I hope staff was following that.
We were trying, Bob.
Yeah, they're wordsmithing us a little bit, but I really think it's a motion to substitute. I think what you're substituting is fast track addendum for emergency action.
Is that generally what you're trying to do? And that fast track addendum will address the negative impacts to the live market of the current tagging program. Is that where you're trying to go? I'm just trying to
Yes. In fact, I was debating whether or not I should offer a motion to substitute or a motion to amend. And I just decided to amend.
Fair enough. I think substitute might be cleaner though, but get you to the same point.
Thank you. Motion to substitute.
Yeah, I would agree. I was going to recommend the same thing. I think there's enough of a difference here that it is a new motion with the exclusion of the emergency action. Let's wait till everybody gets it all right up on the screen. We'll take our time. We'll make sure it's understood before I call for a second. How does that read for you, Emerson?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Thank you.
So under this, I want to make sure it's clear and understandable how we would carry out the remainder of this year into 2024. So a fast track addendum, if it were initiated, would be final action in January, possibly, Bob or James?
Well, I think the idea would be, what alternatives do you want to include in this fast track document? Those aren't really spelled out here. Suspension of the tagging program is one of them, I suppose, but are there other things to include? And I'm not sure about that. And while I'm talking, if this does get a second, the emergency action takes 2/3 vote. But if this one, this motion gets a second, so the motion to substitute will only take a simple majority to become the main motion. And then if it becomes a main motion, then it only takes a simple majority as well, because it's no longer considering an emergency. Hope that's helpful. But back to your timing question, I think, I think it's going to be pretty hard to draft a document and then have the board approve that document, have a public comment period with the holidays and everything else that happens between now and the January meeting, and have final decision in January. I think it's probably the fastest is draft the document between now and January, and then have a quick public comment period for 30 days after the January meeting, and then have a special meeting of the Tautog board prior to the spring meeting in May. Just a standalone virtual meeting of the Tautog board sometime, probably in March, to consider final approval of the document.
Okay, and that would all hinge on information generated by whatever surveys being, not survey, but experiment or tag type analysis is being considered by the technical committee. Is that, James, do you see that?
That would be the best case scenario. Yeah, the study is conducted, between now and the January meeting, as well as drafting the document between now and the January meeting. So it's an informed document on alternatives and different strategies for tagging these live fish.
Okay. So if this motion were to pass, we'd be moving in the process, as Bob just mentioned, with the understanding that beginning on January 1st, 2024, the tagging program will still be effective and in place. So tags will need to be ordered and distributed to fishermen throughout the coast. And the idea would be that would be a continuation of the program for the remainder of 2024. However, depending on the development of the addendum, it could be adjusted at final action of the addendum, which is likely sometime in the spring. Let's just call it that. Okay. All right. So I have clarity on process. Emerson, can I ask that you read that motion into the record, since we moved it around a bunch, and then I'm going to call for a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to substitute to initiate a fast track addendum that will address negative impacts to the live market fishery, satisfying Objective 4 in Section 4.4.1 of Amendment 1.
Excuse me. Okay, we have a motion made by Emerson Hasbrook. I'd look around the table for anyone that would like to second that motion. Justin Davis is going to second the motion. We've heard some rationale. Emerson, regarding this, did you want to add anything to your rationale behind the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've outlined pretty well the issues around the tags, and the tags are having a negative impact on the fish and the fishing industry. We've discussed how the tagging program doesn't meet its objectives. And I think some of the angst around the room might have been an emergency action to suspend the tagging program. But I also heard that we need to continue to investigate alternative tags. We also need to provide the promise of some relief to the fishing industry as we move this forward. So I hope this helps to satisfy some of the concerns that were voiced around the original motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emerson. Is there anyone else around the board? Any thoughts on this one? John Clark, and then John Maniscalco will come back to you. Go ahead, John.
Not so much. I'm just curious about the process. So if the New York buys the tags that are causing all the problems right now to be in compliance for 2024, then once this is passed, they can switch to a different tag for the remainder of 2024. Am I understanding you correctly there?
Well, if a different tag is identified in the study that would, let's say, be more successful in its use, the board would decide on an implementation date for that tag and when that tag would need to start to be used. However, the way I see it, and as somebody who oversees this work in our state, not that we have a lot of tags that we distribute, but I think if the tags were to change in mid-season, it could be, you'd have to order a whole new set of tags with the dates that would correspond with this year, with 2024. You'd have two sets of tags out there. Now, I don't know if the board, I mean, I can't, and this is going to be, Justin Davis will be the one answering these decisions down the road. But I think 2024, I really, the way I envision it, whatever's decided here at the addendum process, the implementation would likely be that 2025 season.
Right. So this doesn't get to New York's immediate problem. It wouldn't be until 2025, really, if they get the relief that they're seeking now. Just want to be clear on that. Thanks.
Yeah, this does not suspend anything. It could potentially suspend the whole program, but it wouldn't be until later this year. So we'd be working under the assumption that we'd be operating as standard with our tagging programs. I'm going to go to John, clear the deck online, and then we're going to come back. I want to be mindful of time. We are a bit over our time period allotted. So I'm going to go to a couple more comments. We'll caucus, and then we're going to vote these motions up or down. John Maniscalco, you're next, and then Shanna. And I had somebody, we'll go to Shanna, and then I'll take one more. Go ahead, John.
So I appreciate that the emergency action wasn't preferred, but this certainly calls into question the whole timing of everything. And I just want to make it very clear that as much as we'd like, New York State does not have the capacity to test these tags and provide ASMFC with any kind of certain viable alternative by the January meeting. I mean, if we did have that, then maybe my initial motion would have read quite differently. But a suspension of the tagging program is really the only way that we're not going to force our fishermen to destroy some of their live product in 2024. I'm not sure how, as much as I'd like to be able to support the substitute, how that's going to accomplish that, given the timing that Bob Beal laid out, that we wouldn't even be at the decision-making point until May. I was on the assumption that at the very least, the fast-track addendum could move more quickly than that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Jana Madsen.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I think this is a question for James. If we switch tag types, does that require an addendum?
James.
No, I believe the FMP only requires that every state use the same tag, but does not specify the type of tag. So that would not require an addendum.
Mike, if I can interject, the tag type was a part of the implementation plan. So that's where we would do that, and the board can approve implementation plans through board action. But everybody has to have the same tag as identified in the FMP.
All right, thanks, Tony. You're like my kids. They ask a question and they do it anyway before I give them the thumbs up on it, but it's all good. Sorry you couldn't be here with us today. Is there anyone else around the table that would like to provide any comment? We are going to take a quick break to caucus. Go ahead, David, real quick.
Just for people to ponder during the break, could we eliminate the need for an addendum if the states are eager to get on with looking into this, develop an alternative tag, and then bring results back to us? If the board approves that alternative, we would just say that that's another way. We would certify that as an acceptable way of tagging the animal and eliminate the need to do an addendum at all. Would that accomplish the same thing without all the work?
Yeah, I mean, that's a reasonable expectation, David. I think had the work been done to provide us that information today, we would be on a totally different footing as to what the next steps are. We don't meet again until the next year. And the study has yet to be finalized as to when and how, and we had some ideas today about other additional elements for the study design. So that's not tightened up enough for me to guarantee in any way that there'd be information to support a decision that would change the tag type prior to early December, I'm sure, when states need to start their ordering process and figuring out what it is they have to purchase for that, for 2024, starting, the first of the year. So it's a timing issue more than anything right now. I'm envisioning that we, if depending on what passes here, we would get to our January meeting with more information about what the next steps might be on a tagging program. If we want to continue it, maybe we make a change to the tag type, and then, based on the study, we need something to inform us, is the way I see it. We don't have that yet. That's just my personal understanding of the situation. And it's tough to make that call when you don't have the information to make that decision. So I think we would wait on that information, make a decision, and then move forward. 2024 just gets mixed up in the crosshairs. James or John, I'm sorry. James told me you had your hand up. Go ahead, John. All right, it's
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was muted and talking to myself. So I was hoping that I could ask Bob one more time to go over the fastest possible timeline for implementation for, a fast track addendum. I was under the opinion that my understanding was that it could happen much quicker than May. It doesn't matter what trials we have a chance to run. It doesn't matter whether we do this by changing the implementation plan. If we are still in a place where we are forcing this tag upon fishermen in 2024, then we are continuing to impose this economic impact on fishermen, forcing them to use a tag that we know destroys their live product, that is contrary to the objective in the amendment. And we need to change that. So whatever we do here today, we should be taking steps towards providing them relief. And that takes off some of this pressure to somehow have a solution that hasn't presented itself yet. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. All right, if we could, let's go ahead and take a 3-minute caucus. Give everybody a chance to discuss. Please discuss both options depending on which one either fails or is supported. And we'll go for, we're not going to take another caucus after this. So come back in 3 minutes. Thank you. Okay, if you can all take your seats. I haven't had enough sweet tea to say, y'all sit down, please. John, while people are taking their seats, James told me your hand's still up. Did you have something you wanted us to follow up with before we call the question?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I was just still looking for a little bit clarification on that fast track addendum timeline from Bob Beal, please. Thanks.
Fast track, Bob. What does it mean?
It's a little bit tricky because there's some conversations around the table that just want to implement a suspension through a fast track addendum. And then there's others that want to have this fast track addendum a bit more informed by the study that's going to be conducted on alternate tag types. So if it's just kind of two different answers. If all you want to do is bring forward a document that contemplates a suspension of the tagging program in 2024, we can do that really quickly. It's a very simple document, status quo or a suspension with probably some time certain. And we could probably do that with board meetings outside of our regular board meetings. We need a 30-day public comment period in there somewhere. So we could get that done probably even within this calendar year. If it's really just that one simple issue, you know, status quo or suspension of tagging. If that's all the addendum is, we can do, the board can do that very quickly and have a 30-day public comment period. But if the board wants to see more information about the tagging study and have that presented to them, obviously if the tagging study is going to retain animals for 30 days and see the impacts of tags, you know, I think if it's that more informed or more extensive fast track addendum, that likely can't be, the study can't be done, the document drafted before our January meeting. So if we do that longer fast track addendum for the January meeting, public comment after that, and then we could probably get the board back together in March to make a decision.
Okay, does that help, John?
It helps very much. I'm just wondering if the maker of the motion, if that was his intention, or if he meant the more involved addendum. Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to ask him. I wanted to make sure you were clear first. So Emerson and Justin, I guess I'll go to Emerson first. Was your intent to create a fast track addendum that only considers a suspension with no consideration for the use of any other additional tag? Is it just a suspension of the program? Bob stated that an addendum to suspend the program could happen potentially within the time period. It would be really tight, I think, still for states that have to order and plan for 2024, but it's possible that it could happen before 2024. Or did your intent, Emerson, was it more long-term in thought that the board would be informed by the tag study and there'd be an option in the addendum not only to suspend the motion, to suspend the tagging program, but there would be other alternatives that would be for implementation of other types of tags, or, you know, just looking for your intent. We'll make sure it's clear before we call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I would like to see the consideration or the amendment consider suspending the program. But I think we also need to investigate alternative tags. And in terms of timing and in terms of what the board is going to want to do, I don't have a crystal ball on that in terms of where this board is going to want to go. I don't know if the board, is going to be more favorable to suspending the program if we go through a quick addendum process, or if we just do it by emergency action today. I don't know that. But I think we need to either provide, or we need to provide relief to the fishing industry and take a look at alternative tags. And maybe the addendum, and I'll look to staff to help answer this. The addendum, I guess, could initially consider a suspension of the program while we're developing alternative tags. And that's possibly the way to go, because I don't know that we're going to have an answer for alternative tags between now and a year from now. But who's going to be doing all of these studies? I mean, New York is going to be doing some, but
Yeah. New York will be doing stuff.
yeah, but for a variety of different tags? Yeah, okay. Excuse me, I'm having a sidebar here. So when is that going to?
First half of 24.
Yeah. So that's going to occur in the first half of 2024. So we're not going to have any kind of tagging results in a fast manner. But I want to start moving that along, and I think we need to consider some relief to the fishing industry. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the only way to know what the board's intent is to vote. And so we have my screen went blank. I'll read the motion over my shoulder. Sorry to turn my back to you guys, but all right. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with calling the question on the vote. I want to remind the board that the substitute motion is a majority rules motion. It does not require 2/3. So we'll see what the board wants to do with that. There's a lot of chat. Is everyone okay with taking a vote here? We've had plenty of time to caucus, okay, and discuss. All right. Motion is move to substitute to initiate a fast track addendum that will address negative impacts to the live market fishery, satisfying Objective 4 in Section 4.4.1 of Amendment 1. Motion by Mr. Hasbrook, seconded by Mr. Davis. All those members of the board in favor of the motion, please raise your hand.
New York,
Okay, I see one. Is there anyone online that raised their hand? Okay. All those opposed, same sign.
Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware.
And NOAA Fisheries, well, I don't see Chris's hand up. He did send a comment in saying they were saying no to the amendment there. Chris has his hand up now.
And NOAA Fisheries. Thank you.
Any abstentions? Any nulls? Okay, seeing none, the motion fails for lack of a majority, which leads us to now the main motion. I will remind the board that this motion will require a 2/3 vote in support in order to pass. I'm going to go ahead and read the motion into the record and then call the question. Move that the Tautog Management Board, by emergency action, as defined in the ISFMP charter, suspend the coastwide commercial Tautog tagging program for 180 days to prevent additional negative impacts to the live market fishery and initiate an addendum that will implement the suspension for the remainder of the 2024 fishing year and consider a long-term suspension if a suitable tag satisfying Objective 4 in Section 4.4.1 of Amendment 1 cannot be identified in time for implementation for 2025. That is, that motion is property of the board at this time. And I'll ask for all those members of the board in favor of the motion to please raise your hand.
New York,
Anyone online? I think we have everyone here except for Chris. Okay, all those opposed, same sign.
Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and no fisheries.
Okay, any abstentions? Any null votes? Okay, that's seeing none, the motion fails for lack of a 2/3 majority. I can call, do you want me to call the numbers out? What was it? 1 to 7. Okay, the motion was 1 in favor, 7 in opposition, 0 abstentions, and 0 nulls. It was 8 against. We're making that correction for the record. Motion fails for a lack of a 2/3 majority. Okay. Is there anything else to come before this board at this time? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this issue still open? I'd like to make a motion to initiate a fast track addendum to suspend the commercial tautog tagging program for the 2024 fishing season. Simple, but I'm not sure what the process would be at this point.
Yeah, we can, okay, so that is different from the intent that Emerson Hasbrook had. So this would be a simple motion to initiate a fast track addendum to suspend, and there would be no other details within that motion or in that addendum. And Bob, you spoke to this already, but while we get it on the board, you just remind us kind of what the timing would look like and when we could possibly take final action on that addendum.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we can, if it is, as John's requesting, a very simple document, there's status quo and there's suspension, and those are the options. We can draft that in a matter, probably by the end of the week, next week, or middle of next week, and get the board together pretty quickly. So I think the hardest part of this is going to be scheduling board meetings when the states are available to get together and talk about it. But we can do that probably in the next 2 weeks or so, I guess, if folks are available. And then we need a 30-day public comment period, and then we can get the board back together after that 30-day public comment period to make a decision about this document. One of the things that is out there is when do the states need their tags? And I think the orders actually have to happen really soon, regardless of what happens with this document. So some states may have to order tags, maybe even all states have to order tags before they know the resolution of what's going to happen with this addendum. So just, I think those orders need to continue just in case the tagging program is not suspended.
And the tagging program would only be suspended if the final result of the addendum would be a vote in favor of suspending and that would eliminate the program altogether for whatever time period that was in the addendum, possibly a year or two, or indefinitely until something else were to follow.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so John, I don't know if I'll go ahead and read it for you. I don't know if you can see the screen. So there's a motion, move to initiate a fast track addendum to suspend the tautog tagging program for the 2024 fishing season. I have a motion by Mr. Maniscalco. Let me look around the table. Is there any second to the motion? Anyone like to second the motion? All right, seeing no seconds, that motion fails for the lack of a second. Is there anything else to come before the board at this time? Seeing none, the Tautog Management Board is now adjourned. And I'll be turning the reins of chair over to Justin Davis after today's meeting. So Justin, good luck. And I think Tony's got me teed up for another board chair somewhere along the way this week. But thanks for your time today. Sorry we went a little bit over time, but I thought it was an important discussion to have. And it does not mean the actions today, just for the members of the public who are watching or listening or here, the actions today do not prevent the board from continued efforts to try to better the tagging program that we currently have. And they do not stop the program from being suspended indefinitely at some point. I think the gist that I got around the table was that some additional information about tags and other questions, other alternate tags was an important element in moving forward. So thank you again. This meeting's adjourned, and I'll turn to Bob to see when we start the next board.
Yeah,